So last week, the Federal Reserve announced QE3. It was expected by much of the market because news had gone south again. And basically Bernanke telegraphed that he would accommodate the market if employment data was still stubbornly going to remain weak. So the market had ramped up ahead of QE3, expecting it to happen, but was still impressed and went up huge when it was announced because almost nobody expected it to be open-ended QE. If you don't understand what that means, it means that the Federal Reserve, instead of announcing, hey, we're going to buy $600 billion worth of whatever security between now and a certain date, then the program's over, they basically said, for now, we're going to buy mortgage-backed securities at a rate of $40 billion a month for as long as we feel like it. And hey, we may adjust it. We may do, we could buy something else, and who knows? And they left a big question mark in the air without an end date, so the market was thrilled. Now, this is pretty scary. You have a market that has completely disconnected from the economy. Some people were saying, I guess primarily Zero Hedge from what I saw, was saying fairly recently, that good news is bad for the market, bad news is good for the market. That used to be true, but I had felt this year is more like good news is good for the market, bad news is good for the market. So asset prices are going towards bubble valuations. The Treasury bubble is still as big as ever. But really my main message with QE3 is for those of you prepping for some sort of economic crisis, like me, I would say get your prepping done. And we're all going to either be too early or too late in finishing up. And QE3 really might be the program that's in place when it hits the fan. I know obviously in mainstream financial media you sound like a psycho if you say that. Hell, I saw a headline on CNBC I think Friday that said what stocks to buy with the Fed's free money. I remember back before QE2 was announced, if you were to imply that Fed liquidity was pumping up the stock markets, you were dismissed as a conspiracy theorist. Obviously, stocks are rising because of the piping hot recovery that's just around the corner, and now it's mainstream news that this is pumping up asset prices. So what's the next thing that's going to be on a mainstream outlet's headline that used to be unspeakable? So I think that many people in the industry should have been very concerned that Bernanke was going to fire his last bullet of basically QE for as long as we feel like it. It could be however big we want it to be. It could go on for as long as we want it to go on. Who knows? When commodity prices are already very high. Something people need to realize is the Fed and the ECB are both no longer able to fight inflation. And I'm tired, and people are beginning to realize this, and their reaction to it is to act like you're some sort of psychopath conspiracy theorist for implying that we could ever have inflation. Because the Fed can't do anything about it anymore. So it must never come. Because what central banks have become are agents of the state. They make it possible for governments to raise money because they are at unsustainable deficits. This is why I say that there's a sovereign debt bubble, just like there was a tech bubble and a housing bubble, and this bubble will burst, and people will never put treasury and bubble in the same sentence because it implies something bad. Therefore, screw fundamental analysis. It must not be true. So this is the reason why I'm making this video, is to encourage people to prep, like I am, and to explain why maybe you should be concerned right now. What if there's inflation? You remember, if you watched the markets, if you're in the industry, you're probably watching commodity prices shoot up back in the QE2 days. When QE2 started, commodity prices were pretty low. Then it hit, everything spiked, then it ended, and the world freaked out about Europe, and asset prices fell on their face. Okay, fine. Inflation, you had our typical food and energy inflation that, of course, is always bleeding us dry, but CPI numbers were basically flat, and the everyday stuff you were getting at Walmart was not going up in a way that frightened anyone. So it didn't happen yet. That money was basically printed and didn't go into the economy. It will, but it didn't yet. But you would have like the president, the CEO of Walmart go on record saying, we might have to raise prices soon. People are getting squeezed. It's just QE2 ended. QE3 ends when employment data gets pretty solid, sustainably, which doesn't come from this type of economic policy. So when's it going to end? Commodity prices are already very high. Will they just keep going up? I don't know. This is unprecedented. But looking at history, that fear is there. So how can the Fed fight inflation? By raising rates and selling treasuries, both of which risk popping the treasury bubble. Same with the ECB. And most of all, same with the BOJ. Bank of Japan can't fight inflation over there. We're flooding the world with liquidity, flooding the world with the world reserve currency. This is frightening. Everything else that a central bank has done up until now has been to kick the can down the road. This, I think, does the opposite. Everything else has been, the day of reckoning will be later now. It'll be worse because of what we're doing, but it'll be later. This, I think, makes it earlier. So, if you're thinking about buying food, water filters, whatever, do it. If you've been doing it, get more. It'll just get more expensive. If you haven't started buying gold and silver yet, but at the very least, for pure prepping purposes, get some silver. Get your prepping done, guys. And if you watch this and you laugh at me, well, I'm sure there was a day years ago, if I heard something like this, I would have laughed too. I don't know what to tell you, but I hope something snaps you out of it.